Hello friends, I'm glad you're here tonight, ready to drift slowly into this quiet journey together. And before we begin, I want to ask you something simple. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Is it late at night with the world already silent outside your window? Or is it perhaps early morning with the first light just beginning to touch your room? Because I always find it fascinating to imagine this story traveling across distances and meeting you wherever you are. Now let me take you far away, not into a peaceful meadow or a quiet countryside, but into the dark and muddy landscapes of Europe during the First World War. A place where being a doctor meant more than just tending to wounds. It meant living between two worlds, one of medicine and one of endless destruction. Imagine stepping into a field hospital for the first time, perhaps set up in a barn or inside a canvas tent pitched just behind the trenches. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, wet straw, and the sharp metallic tang of blood, and even before you see anything, the sounds reach you. Groans, hurried footsteps, the distant thunder of artillery, and above it all, the clipped voices of men trying to keep order where order hardly exists. To be a doctor here is to stand at the very edge of human endurance. Every day you wake not to a schedule but to chaos. There is no telling when the next wave of stretchers will arrive, and no telling what kind of injuries you will have to face. Shrapnel tears through flesh in ways that even years of training cannot prepare you for, and poison gas burns lungs and skin until men are barely recognizable. You hold scalpels, bandages, and bottles of morphine, but sometimes it feels as though you are trying to hold back a tide with nothing more than your hands. And yet, even in this grim setting, life takes on a strange rhythm. The doctors, nurses, and orderlies form small communities, bound not by choice but by necessity. In the evenings, if there is a quiet moment, they might sit around a small stove, drinking weak coffee or tea, sharing cigarettes passed from hand to hand, talking about anything but the war outside. Someone might hum a tune remembered from home, a fragment of a lullaby or a folk song, and for a brief instant the world softens. The food is usually poor, stew that tastes more of turnips than of meat, stale bread, sometimes a little jam if supplies have been kind. But after hours of surgeries and endless bandaging, even the simplest bite feels like a feast. The strange thing about being a doctor on the front is that you are both deeply respected and quietly resented. The soldiers look at you with hope when they are carried in, whispering your name as though you might be a miracle worker. But they also curse you under their breath when the pain is too great, when the bandages are rough, when the only answer you can give them is amputation. There are no gentle choices here, only necessary ones, and each cut of the saw is a decision that follows you long after the sound of battle has faded. Sometimes, in the rare stillness of night, when the shells are quiet and the lanterns flicker low, the doctors write letters home. They describe the weather, the food, perhaps a story of a soldier who smiled even in his pain. But what they cannot put into words is the weight pressing down on their chests. The knowledge that tomorrow will be the same, that more bodies will arrive, that no matter how hard they work, the war will always demand more. Some scribble poetry, others sketch crude drawings of the camp, trying to capture with lines and ink what words alone cannot express. There are whispers, too, drifting through the wards like smoke. Whispers of new weapons, of offensives being planned, of entire villages disappearing in flames. Soldiers share rumors about the enemy, about spies, about strange lights in the sky that some swear are omens. Doctors listen but rarely comment, for their world is measured not in rumors but in heartbeats and breathing, in whether a man will wake tomorrow or not. Still, those whispers cling, and sometimes when you close your eyes at last, you hear them louder than the gunfire. But what is most striking, and perhaps most haunting, is the resilience of the human spirit. There are men who, even with wounds that should have broken them, crack jokes as you stitch them back together. There are nurses who smile gently, even after days without proper sleep, wiping a brow with tenderness as though the war outside were only a bad dream. There are orderlies who whistle while carrying buckets of bloody bandages, pretending for a moment that this is simply another job, another day. These fragments of normalcy, fragile as glass, are what keep the doctors moving forward. And as you walk through the hospital, your boots sticking to the mud, lantern light casting long shadows on the canvas walls. You realize that this is not just a place of suffering but also of extraordinary endurance. The war has stripped life down to its rawest form, and in this rawness you glimpse truths that in peacetime often remain hidden. That kindness can exist even in horror, that courage can rise from despair, and that healing is not only about the body but also about the will to continue. So let us continue deeper into this world, and see not only what the doctors endured, but also how they found ways, however small, to hold on to their humanity amidst the endless roar of the First World War. When dawn comes, it is not a gentle awakening but a reminder that time does not stop, not even for war. The faint glow through the canvas walls brings with it the sound of carts creaking, boots trampling mud, and voices calling out orders. For the doctors, there is no clear division between night and day, only a blur of hours marked by the arrival of the wounded. At times it feels like standing at the bottom of a river while waves of men pour endlessly in, each one with a story written in torn uniforms, shattered bones, and haunted eyes. The first tasks of the morning are often practical: checking instruments, boiling water, scrubbing tables that never stay clean for long. Sterilization is more an aspiration than a guarantee. Even though carbolic acid and iodine are used, and bandages are carefully wrapped in linen, infection remains an enemy as lethal as any bullet. A doctor might save a soldier from bleeding out only to watch helplessly days later as fever takes him. In those moments, you feel a frustration deeper than exhaustion, because knowledge exists but the tools are too few, the medicines too scarce, and the war too unrelenting to allow proper healing. Imagine standing over a man brought in from the trenches with gas burns across his chest. The stench of chlorine still clings to him, his skin blistered, his breathing ragged. The doctor bends low, listening to each wheeze, knowing that there is little to be done beyond oxygen, rest, and hope. Then the next stretcher arrives, this time a young boy no older than 18, missing part of his leg, his face pale but strangely calm, whispering only for water. The doctor's mind must shift in an instant, from one hopeless case to another where speed might mean survival. This constant shifting, this demand to act without pause, gnaws at the nerves like acid. And yet, amid the endless stream of emergencies, there are glimpses of humanity. Sometimes a soldier will pull a crumpled photograph from his pocket, pressing it into the doctor's hand with trembling fingers. The picture might be of a sweetheart in a summer dress, or a family gathered outside a farmhouse, their smiles frozen in time. The doctor does not always know what to say, but he tucks the photo into a safe place, promising it will not be lost, even if the man does not wake again. These small acts of guardianship, unspoken and quiet, become a sacred duty alongside surgery and bandaging. Meals are hurried and rarely satisfying. Breakfast might be a tin of condensed milk shared between 3 people, or porridge so thin it barely clings to the spoon. Occasionally, supplies bring salted beef, but it is tough and often spoiled. Doctors learn to eat quickly, in between operations, sometimes with blood still staining their hands, the taste of iron mingling with bread. And yet, no matter how grim, food becomes an anchor, a reminder of life's simplest rhythms. To eat is to affirm that one is still alive, that there is still work to be done. There is also a strange camaraderie between doctors and the nurses who work beside them. Many of the nurses are young women who volunteered, some from wealthy families who had never lifted anything heavier than a teacup, others from humble villages where hard work was already a way of life. In the hospitals, their roles blur. They bandage, they carry water, they steady men writhing on operating tables. At night, they read letters aloud to soldiers who cannot hold a pen, their voices gentle, steady, carrying words from far away into the mud and chaos. Doctors often find themselves relying on them not only for practical tasks, but also for the fragile thread of kindness that runs through their presence. Entertainment, if it can be called that, is improvised. Someone might play a harmonica rescued from a soldier's pack, or recite verses from memory. There are stories told in low voices, jokes traded despite the darkness. And once in a while, laughter echoes faintly across the tents. The doctors listen, sometimes even contribute, though always with a heaviness that cannot fully lift. They know that many of those laughing tonight will not be here tomorrow, and so every sound of mirth feels both beautiful and unbearably fragile. The strain of the work is not only physical but also moral. A doctor must make choices that feel impossible. Whom to treat first when stretchers arrive in groups of 10, which wounds are worth attempting, and which men must be left to die quietly with a dose of morphine. These are not decisions taught in medical schools. They are decisions forged in the crucible of necessity, leaving scars on the conscience deeper than those on the skin. Some doctors confess to priests, some write in journals, some simply bury their guilt beneath endless work. Yet it always lingers, surfacing in the quiet hours between battles. Outside the hospitals, the war grinds on. Doctors hear the distant thunder of artillery, the rattle of machine guns, the sudden silence that falls before an attack. Sometimes shells land close, shaking the ground, rattling bottles and lamps. In those moments, fear rushes through every person inside the hospital, because they know the thin canvas walls offer no real protection. And yet, once the tremors fade, they return to their tasks. There is no other choice. And then there are the strange encounters, the moments that almost feel surreal. A bird flying into the tent and perching on a beam as though mocking the chaos below. A soldier delirious from fever who begins reciting Shakespeare in a clear, resonant voice until he collapses back into unconsciousness. A nurse who weeps silently while washing her hands, only to smile again the moment she steps into the ward. These fragments of the extraordinary remind the doctors that they are still living, still human, even in a place designed to erase all softness. By evening, fatigue weighs down every movement. Hands tremble while stitching, eyes blur while reading notes, and minds wander dangerously toward despair. But then a soldier, newly bandaged, manages a weak smile and whispers, "Thank you, doctor." And that simple phrase becomes a lifeline, pulling the weary physician back from the edge. It is not glory that sustains them, nor patriotism alone, but the knowledge that in a world dedicated to destruction, they are still creating moments of survival, however small, however fleeting. And so the cycle continues, with the hospital beating like a fragile heart in the shadow of war, a place where doctors live not in grand gestures, but in countless tiny acts of endurance, kindness, and sacrifice. There is a strange rhythm to life on the front, and as a doctor you begin to feel it as keenly as the soldiers themselves. The thunder of bombardments comes and goes like a tide, surging for days and then receding into uneasy silence. During those quiet intervals, when the guns fall still, you might think there would be rest, but for doctors the work never ends. It is in those hours that the wounded are dragged back from the shattered trenches, carried across mud-slick fields, laid in rows outside the hospital, waiting their turn for treatment. Sometimes you go forward yourself, closer to the lines, because the injuries are too urgent to wait for transport. That means stepping into dugouts, into makeshift shelters carved into earth, lit by dim candles that sputter against the damp. The smell hits you first: mud, unwashed bodies, and the bitter reek of cordite. Men lie in the shadows, some clutching their wounds, others staring blankly, their minds still trapped in the terror of bombardment. You kneel beside them, your satchel heavy with bandages and bottles, and try to bring a fragment of order into a place where order no longer exists. The trench world is another universe, and every doctor who sets foot there feels the weight of it. The walls drip with moisture, rats scurry boldly between boots, and men speak in low voices, as though even their words might draw enemy fire. Meals are tins of bully beef, hard biscuits that can break teeth, sometimes just tea brewed in blackened cans over small flames. Soldiers offer you a sip when you pass through, treating you as both a savior and a guest, and you accept, knowing that in their eyes you represent a fragile thread of safety, however thin. The soldiers ask you questions, sometimes about their chances if they are wounded, sometimes about rumors they've heard, but often about things far from war. They ask what cities look like now, if theaters still run plays, if there is still music in the streets back home. And you, as a doctor, you want to tell them yes, always yes, even if you are not certain. Because hope is a medicine of its own, one that costs nothing but gives much. Back in the hospital, the day is carved into endless operations. The instruments clink on metal trays, water boils in great black pots, nurses move swiftly with arms full of cloth. A doctor learns to count time not by hours but by cases. 2 amputations before noon, a dozen shrapnel wounds before dusk, 1 gas victim who slipped away just before midnight. The rhythm is harsh, but it is rhythm nonetheless, and without it the mind would drown. There are rare deliveries of supplies, when carts roll in with crates of medicines, food, or sometimes luxuries from home. The arrival of morphine vials is greeted like treasure, for they mean fewer screams, less agony. A box of chocolates sent by a charity group can transform the mood of the entire tent, soldiers sucking on them like children, their eyes closing in momentary bliss. Even newspapers, often weeks out of date, are devoured eagerly. Men reading aloud fragments of political speeches, sporting results, or theater reviews. Anything that reminds them the world still exists beyond mud and wire. At night, when the lanterns burn low, conversations drift into strange places. Doctors speak in hushed tones about medical advances, about the new antiseptics or experimental surgeries being attempted in bigger hospitals further from the line. Some dream aloud about what medicine will look like after the war, about how lessons learned in this crucible of suffering might one day save lives in times of peace. And yet, there is always the shadow of doubt, because many suspect that if peace ever comes, the world will be too changed to return to what it once was. Sleep, when it comes, is brief and unsettled. Doctors collapse on cots still wearing their aprons, sometimes waking in the middle of the night convinced they hear the call of their name, only to realize it is just the echo of memory. Nightmares are common, visions of amputations that never ended, of faces that begged for help that could not be given. The mind tries to rest but cannot fully escape the weight of what the eyes have seen. Still, there are rituals of comfort. Some write letters before sleeping, the scratch of pen on paper a small defiance against despair. They describe the landscape in vague terms, never admitting the true horror, but perhaps mentioning the moonlight on the tents or the sound of a lark overhead. Some keep diaries, hidden away, filled with sketches of instruments, diagrams of wounds, or simply fragments of thoughts scrawled in margins. These writings, though not meant for anyone else, become a silent companion, a place to pour the heaviness that words spoken aloud cannot release. Then there are the rare moments of beauty that arrive unexpectedly. A snowfall covering the wreckage of the battlefield, turning mud into a silent white expanse, muffling even the distant guns. A nurse receiving a package from home filled with lavender soap, and the entire ward smelling faintly of flowers for a day. A soldier sitting up, weak but alive, thanking the doctor with a handshake so firm it brings tears to tired eyes. These moments do not erase the suffering, but they pierce it with light, reminding everyone why they keep going. And through it all, the doctor learns something that no textbook could teach, that healing is not only about the body, but also about the mind and spirit. A clean bandage can stop bleeding, but a kind word, a joke shared at the right moment, or even the simple presence of someone who cares can mean the difference between despair and endurance. It is this quiet truth, discovered in the mud and shadows of the front, that shapes every doctor who survives the war. The days blend into each other in a strange, relentless pattern. There is rarely a clear morning or evening, only moments that mark the passage of time. The groan of a stretcher, the whistle of wind through the torn tents, the distant rumble of artillery that reminds you that even here, behind the fragile walls of the hospital, the war is never far. And yet, amidst this endless cycle, the doctor begins to notice the small triumphs that, when strung together, form the fragile scaffolding of hope. A soldier who arrives barely able to walk is helped back to his feet after weeks of careful bandaging and painstaking exercises, and the smile he offers is worth more than any medal. A young recruit, screaming with pain as gangrene spreads, is calmed by the gentle touch of a nurse, then guided through surgery with careful precision, surviving against odds that seem impossible. These victories are quiet, often unnoticed by the world outside, but within the walls of the field hospital, they echo loudly, proof that the endless labor has meaning. Doctors also discover that healing is as much psychological as it is physical. Men who are terrified of the battlefield are encouraged to talk, to recount memories of home, to laugh at a story or a joke. And sometimes those moments of distraction are the difference between a soldier succumbing to despair or finding the strength to endure another day. A simple game of cards, shared between broken men on stretchers, can lift spirits more effectively than morphine, reminding everyone that even in the depths of suffering, life persists. Meals continue to be meager, but inventive minds find ways to bring comfort to the weary. If fresh vegetables arrive, they are boiled into thick stews, sometimes enriched with scraps of meat salvaged from previous rations. Bread, though hard and stale, is toasted over a small fire and smeared with butter or jam when available. Soldiers share what they can, and in this act of generosity, the hospital becomes a strange community where resources are scarce, but the human need for connection and nourishment is never denied. Amidst this daily labor, there are moments when the doctor is called upon to make decisions that weigh heavily on the conscience. Choices about who receives surgery first, how to allocate scarce supplies, or whether a soldier should endure a painful procedure or be spared further suffering haunt every decision. These moral dilemmas leave no easy answers, and each one carves its mark into the psyche. Yet, paradoxically, it is the act of making these decisions, of acting decisively, that keeps the mind sharp and the hand steady, a fragile anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Communication with the outside world is intermittent, and letters are treasured. Soldiers cling to every word from home, and doctors often become messengers of hope, reading aloud letters from family, recounting stories from villages and towns far away. When a letter mentions a birth, a wedding, or even a simple festival, the entire ward can pause, the weight of war momentarily lifted by the reminder that life continues beyond the trenches. Doctors, though busy, cannot help but smile at these fragments of normalcy, feeling that in sharing them, they are protecting a piece of humanity in a place designed to erode it. Yet the shadow of death is never far. Even the most careful surgery cannot prevent infection in many cases. Men who have survived artillery blasts and gas attacks sometimes succumb to fever or gangrene days later. Doctors learn to work efficiently, to balance hope with realism, and to perform the delicate act of comforting families when they arrive at the front to identify loved ones. Each life lost is a lesson in humility, each recovery a moment of quiet triumph. Entertainment such as it exists becomes a ritual. Improvised concerts, songs hummed quietly in corners, and the occasional story read aloud from a smuggled book help to create pockets of normalcy. Soldiers laugh softly at jokes, even if the sound is tinged with pain or exhaustion, and doctors find that these moments, brief and fragile as they are, sustain everyone through the next wave of suffering. Music, words, and laughter become a strange form of medicine, administered alongside morphine and bandages, each equally vital to survival. The weather outside is unpredictable, adding another layer of challenge. Rain turns paths into mud, making the transport of stretchers treacherous and leaving the tents leaking and cold. Snow brings its own dangers, freezing hands and stiffening muscles, making every action laborious. Yet, even under these conditions, doctors continue to work, adapting with ingenuity. Blankets are layered, fires are kindled, and ingenuity is applied to every obstacle, because the lives of soldiers depend on their ability to persist despite adversity. As evening falls, exhausted bodies move sluggishly through the hospital. Doctors, nurses, and orderlies alike are weary, but the work does not pause. Bandages are replaced, notes are written, and preparations are made for whatever the night will bring. Occasionally, the lull allows for reflection, a quiet moment to think about the journey that brought them here, the lessons learned, and the unyielding responsibility they bear. Through all these experiences, the doctor becomes something more than a healer of bodies. They become a witness to humanity at its most vulnerable and resilient. They see fear, courage, despair, and hope, often all in the same moment. They learn that in a world torn apart by violence, the smallest acts of kindness, skill, and presence are monumental. It is in these acts that the essence of medicine, of service, and of survival is revealed. And so, the life of a doctor on the front continues, a mixture of endless labor, fleeting triumphs, and moments of quiet reflection. Each day brings new challenges, new faces, and new stories, weaving together a tapestry of human endurance against the backdrop of one of history's most devastating conflicts. The morning often begins before you even notice it. A faint light creeps through the seams of the tent, carrying with it the distant echoes of artillery and the low moans of men already awake and in pain. The doctor rises, sometimes stiff from the previous night spent bent over a stretcher, hands raw from repeated bandaging and scrubbing. Yet there is no time to linger. Every hour carries the possibility of a new wave of casualties, each one demanding attention, each one a reminder that war is both endless and unforgiving. As you step outside the tent, mud clinging to your boots, you notice the faint traces of life amid the devastation. A small cluster of wildflowers struggling through churned earth, the song of a bird daring to sing despite the chaos, a thin line of smoke from a distant farmhouse, all reminders that the world continues even in the shadow of destruction. These glimpses of beauty are fleeting, but for a doctor, they are precious. They are evidence that life, even in its most stubborn form, refuses to yield completely. The wounded arrive in waves, sometimes in silence, sometimes shouting through pain and fear. Each case is different. Shrapnel embedded in a shoulder, a leg twisted unnaturally, burns that blister the skin and leave it raw to the touch. Some men arrive fully conscious, clinging to consciousness as if sheer will can stave off death, while others are delirious, murmuring names, memories, or fragments of home. You move from patient to patient, the world shrinking to the immediacy of bleeding, infection, and fragile human life. Meals are brief and functional. Soldiers rarely have time to enjoy the tins of meat or the thin slices of bread provided, and doctors often eat in silence, sharing morsels with the men if possible. Coffee, weak and bitter, becomes a ritual, a small anchor against the relentless tide of responsibility. Occasionally, a joke passes between a nurse and a doctor, a fleeting spark of normalcy in a world consumed by suffering, and for a moment, the oppressive weight of war lifts, just enough to breathe. Supplies are never guaranteed. Morphine is rationed carefully, bandages are patched together from old cloth, and the arrival of fresh medicine is an event that transforms the mood of the ward. Doctors learn to improvise, to create solutions from whatever is at hand, turning old rags into effective dressings, purifying water by fire and grit, and even using mud and ash as temporary antiseptics when all else fails. Ingenuity becomes as essential as skill, and the ability to remain calm under pressure is tested constantly. There are moments of rare, almost surreal levity. A soldier might joke about the strange assortment of injuries he has witnessed, or a nurse might recount a humorous tale from home that makes even the most pained men chuckle. Laughter in the ward is fragile, always threatened by the arrival of the next stretcher, but it exists nonetheless, a reminder that humanity can persist even under unimaginable stress. Doctors also witness the intimate realities of fear and courage. Some men tremble so violently that even holding them steady for surgery feels impossible, while others remain stoic, their eyes fixed on the ceiling, enduring pain without a word. Observing these extremes, the doctor learns more than medicine alone can teach. They learn empathy, patience, and the delicate art of knowing when to push forward and when to hold back, when words can heal as effectively as bandages, and when silence is more powerful than reassurance. Nightfall brings a different kind of challenge. The tents grow cold, shadows stretch long across the canvas, and fatigue seeps into every muscle. Doctors move carefully, mindful of the dark, listening for subtle changes in breathing or heartbeats, aware that one misstep can mean disaster. The distant rumble of artillery continues, sometimes closer, sometimes fainter, a grim lullaby that punctuates the night. Sleep is a scarce commodity, snatched in stolen moments between emergencies, and often dreams are haunted by the faces of those who could not be saved. Yet even in the darkest hours, small victories shine. A soldier who was barely breathing opens his eyes and whispers a name. A wound that seemed hopeless begins to heal. A nurse manages to soothe a terrified man into calm. These moments are celebrated quietly, often without words, but they carry weight greater than any recognition or reward. They are proof that even in the heart of destruction, the human spirit can endure. The doctor also becomes a historian of sorts, witnessing stories that will never reach newspapers or official records. Conversations with soldiers reveal homes forgotten, loves lost, dreams deferred, and fears unspoken. The doctor listens, records mentally the fragments of humanity that persist amid ruin, understanding that these small details, the private stories of ordinary men, are as significant as any strategic victory on the battlefield. Evenings occasionally offer a pause, a fleeting stillness where the sounds of battle fade slightly, and the staff gathers briefly to share a warm drink, recount news from the day, or simply exchange glances that acknowledge shared endurance. These pauses are delicate and rare, but they sustain morale and reinforce the bond between those who navigate the horrors together. In these moments, the hospital feels less like a place of suffering and more like a fragile community, held together by shared responsibility, resilience, and care. Through all this, the doctor's understanding of life and death deepens. Every decision carries consequence. Every touch can bring relief or comfort, and every action is a measure of skill and humanity combined. The role is never easy, rarely rewarded beyond the gratitude of those saved, and yet it is indispensable, a lifeline in a world otherwise consumed by chaos. The day ends not with closure but with preparation. Supplies are checked, instruments cleaned, and notes reviewed. The staff knows that the night may bring emergencies as urgent as any during the day, that the war does not pause for fatigue or reflection. And so, even in exhaustion, even with hands raw and backs aching, the doctors ready themselves to continue, because the wounded will come again, as they always do, and the work of healing cannot stop, not for a moment, not for a heartbeat. The early morning light filters unevenly through the canvas, illuminating the mud-caked floors and scattered tools, and the doctor rises once more, knowing that the day will be another unrelenting test of endurance and skill. Outside, the distant sounds of war remind everyone that nothing has changed. The trenches continue to gape with violence, artillery thunders, and the landscape itself seems to sigh under the weight of constant devastation. Yet within the hospital, another kind of battle is waged, quieter but no less significant. A battle against pain, despair, infection, and the relentless march of exhaustion that threatens to overtake both patients and those who care for them. The first casualties are often the hardest, arriving with the sun still low, faces etched with terror, arms twisted, legs mangled, or gas burns searing through the lungs. The doctor moves among them with practiced efficiency, but even experience cannot erase the shock of seeing life so fragile, so immediate, hanging by a thread. Every incision, every stitch, every careful application of bandages becomes a measure of both hope and skill, and for a moment, time seems suspended, the world reduced to the soft sounds of breathing, the hiss of antiseptic, and the subtle heartbeat of those struggling to survive. Supplies, when they arrive, bring temporary relief and occasional joy. Fresh bandages, antiseptics, and morphine are distributed carefully, almost ceremoniously, and the arrival of a crate of food, bread, tinned meat, sometimes even small luxuries like chocolate, creates a rare celebration among staff and soldiers alike. Men laugh softly, teasing each other about who gets the best portion, and for a fleeting moment, the relentless stress of war loosens its grip. Yet these moments are fragile, for just beyond the hospital walls, the battlefield remains indifferent, waiting to test endurance once more. Doctors also face the weight of decisions that cannot be postponed. When two soldiers arrive simultaneously, both severely wounded, choices must be made about who receives immediate attention and who must wait. Each decision carries moral weight. Each choice leaves a mark on the conscience, and yet hesitation can mean death. The ability to act swiftly with clarity and precision becomes as critical as any surgical skill. And still, after every procedure, after every life saved or lost, there is a moment of reflection, quiet and unspoken, as the doctor considers the fragile line between success and failure, between life and death. Amid these clinical challenges, the human element asserts itself in unexpected ways. Soldiers whisper stories of home, of farms and rivers and towns they might never see again. Some recite poems they remember from childhood. Others sing faint songs, voices cracked with pain but resilient nonetheless. Nurses often become conduits for these stories, reading letters aloud, soothing fears, and offering smiles that, for a moment, pierce the darkness. These small gestures, though seemingly inconsequential, weave a delicate web of morale that sustains everyone within the hospital walls. Meals continue to be functional rather than enjoyable, but necessity breeds creativity. Thin soups are enriched with whatever vegetables and scraps of meat are available, and stale bread is toasted over small fires. Soldiers share rations, nurses distribute what little sweets arrive from charitable organizations, and doctors eat quickly, often while attending to another patient or preparing for the next emergency. Despite their scarcity, these moments of shared sustenance provide more than nutrition. They reinforce the fragile bonds between individuals navigating an unrelenting landscape of suffering. The quiet moments of the day are often the most revealing. A doctor might pause to watch a patient, noticing how a soldier shifts slightly to avoid pain, or how a man clings to a letter from home, reading it over and over as if it were a talisman against despair. Nurses move silently, tending to small details, the arrangement of blankets, the careful cleaning of instruments, the whispered reassurances that accompany every action. Even amidst chaos, attention to such details reflects a dedication to humanity, a refusal to let the war strip life entirely of dignity. Yet exhaustion never truly allows for reflection. Every night, lanterns flicker in the dim tents, shadows dancing over walls streaked with mud and blood, while the doctor moves from cot to cot, checking vital signs, adjusting bandages, and recording notes. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow, punctuated by sudden awakenings to attend to emergencies, the ringing of distant artillery, or the faint cries of men whose pain cannot be ignored. Dreams are often haunted by memories of those who could not be saved, faces etched into the mind with painful clarity, reminding the doctor that even respite carries the weight of responsibility. Despite all this, there are moments of unexpected levity. A soldier recovering from a minor surgery might insist on demonstrating a clumsy dance, eliciting chuckles from those nearby. Nurses sometimes play quiet games, passing a small ball or improvising contests to lighten the mood. These interludes, though brief, are treasured, providing a reprieve from the relentless reality and a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, human resilience and humor persist. As evening descends, the work does not slow. Bandages are changed, instruments cleaned, and preparations made for the uncertain hours of night. The distant rumble of artillery persists, mingling with the quiet hum of the hospital as staff completes their tasks with careful precision. The doctor reflects on the day, not in grand terms, but in the countless small victories, the moments of courage, and the fragments of hope that punctuate an otherwise unyielding landscape of suffering. And through all these experiences, the doctor learns, as much from observing humanity as from practicing medicine, that courage is not always loud, that heroism is not always celebrated, and that the smallest acts of care, an extra blanket, a gentle word, a moment of patience, can mean the difference between despair and survival. In the relentless rhythm of war, these quiet battles, fought within the wards and tents, are among the most significant. The day begins again, as though the previous hours were merely a prelude to another relentless stretch of duty. The doctor emerges from the tent into the gray light of dawn, greeted by mud, the smell of smoke, and the distant echo of artillery that seems to stretch forever. Yet within the chaos, there are fragile threads of normalcy, moments that seem almost impossible against the backdrop of destruction, but which provide a tenuous anchor for both patients and staff. A kettle boils over a small fire, steam curling upward and carrying the faint aroma of tea, a luxury that is treasured far beyond its simplicity. A nurse hums softly as she arranges clean linens, the melody clinging to the air like a defiance against despair. The wounded arrive in waves that are unpredictable in their timing and severity. Some stagger in on their own, faces pale, limbs trembling, while others are carried on stretchers by exhausted comrades who themselves are barely holding on to consciousness. The doctor moves between them with a practiced precision that belies the exhaustion etched into every line of his body. Each wound is unique, each case a puzzle demanding attention, skill, and often improvisation. Shrapnel embedded deep within muscle, compound fractures that defy easy alignment, burns that sear skin and leave tissue raw and fragile. All must be assessed, treated, and stabilized, often with supplies that are barely sufficient. Small triumphs, though rare, are celebrated quietly. A man who could barely move the previous day now manages to sit upright, supported by a nurse who steadies him with gentle hands. Another soldier, delirious from fever and pain, smiles faintly as he recognizes a familiar voice reading a letter from home. These moments, brief and easily overlooked, provide the kind of hope that sustains both patient and healer through the next onslaught of suffering. Each smile, each gesture of acknowledgement, is a reminder that even amid devastation, life persists in stubborn, often miraculous ways. Meals continue to be practical and hurried. Thin soups, sometimes thickened with whatever scraps are available, provide more sustenance than pleasure, while stale bread and hard biscuits are shared among the men and staff. Occasionally, a parcel arrives with small treats, chocolate, canned fruit, or perhaps a tin of coffee, and for a moment, the ward is transformed. Men laugh quietly as they trade bites, teasing each other, and even the most exhausted doctors allow themselves a small taste of relief in the shared experience. These fleeting indulgences are treasured, marking brief interludes of humanity in a place dominated by pain. Supplies are a constant concern. Morphine must be rationed carefully, antiseptics are in limited supply, and bandages are often improvised from torn sheets or old cloth. Yet necessity breeds ingenuity. Doctors discover unconventional solutions, boiling rags to sterilize them, using mud and ash for temporary dressings when nothing else is available, and crafting makeshift splints from broken furniture or discarded crates. Each solution is a delicate balance between practicality and compassion, designed to preserve life in the harshest conditions imaginable. Amid these practical challenges, the emotional demands are relentless. The doctor must witness men succumb to wounds despite every effort, see faces etched with pain and terror, and offer comfort that sometimes cannot be fully given. Decisions about who receives treatment first, who must wait, and who may be beyond saving are made continuously, each one carrying the weight of conscience. Yet these choices, though agonizing, are inseparable from the role, and it is in navigating them that the doctor's humanity is both tested and affirmed. Quiet moments offer glimpses into the human spirit. A soldier might recount a childhood memory, describe a river he used to fish in, or recite a poem he barely remembers. Nurses often read letters from home aloud, letting the words travel from one ear to another, carrying hope and connection in their wake. Even small games, a card drawn at random, a makeshift competition of strength or dexterity, bring laughter and distraction, ephemeral yet powerful in preserving morale. The hospital, in these moments, becomes a strange haven, a fragile world where life is measured not only by survival, but by the ability to feel, to remember, and to imagine beyond the mud and blood. The doctor learns to observe closely, noticing subtle signs of change. A twitch in a hand, a shift in breathing, the slightest flush of color returning to pale skin. These indicators guide every decision, revealing what measures to take next and often determining whether a patient will survive. The work is meticulous, demanding both knowledge and intuition, and every success carries a profound sense of accomplishment. Yet failures are inevitable, and the emotional toll of watching life slip away despite best efforts is constant, etched into memory like scars that never fade. Evening brings no true respite. The dim lanterns cast long shadows, and the staff moves through the ward with quiet efficiency, checking notes, adjusting bandages, and preparing for the uncertain night ahead. The distant sound of artillery continues, a low, persistent reminder that the battle outside never ceases. Sleep is often shallow and interrupted, filled with fragments of trauma, memories of those lost, and anticipation of the work to come. Yet in this exhaustion, a kind of rhythm emerges, a flow that guides the hands and steadies the mind even when fatigue presses hard against every nerve. Amid the relentless labor, the doctor finds meaning in small gestures. A nurse's gentle touch while adjusting a blanket, a soldier's whispered thanks, the quiet act of reading letters aloud. These are the moments that define the work as much as surgery or bandaging. They are proof that even in the most harrowing circumstances, compassion persists, a lifeline that sustains both patient and healer. Through each day and night, the doctor comes to understand that the role is not simply about saving lives, but about preserving humanity in a world designed to strip it away. Every action, every decision, every word carries weight, shaping the experience of those under care and reinforcing the delicate balance between despair and endurance. In this crucible of suffering, the doctor becomes both witness and participant in the profound, fragile drama of life at the front, learning that courage, hope, and compassion are often the most critical tools of all. The gray light of dawn barely touches the torn canvas of the hospital tents, yet already there is movement. Figures carrying stretchers, the shuffle of boots on mud, whispers exchanged in low voices that mix with the distant rumble of artillery. For the doctor, each day begins before conscious thought, as if the body knows instinctively what is required. Readiness, vigilance, and an unyielding focus on the men who arrive wounded, terrified, or delirious. The trenches beyond stretch like gaping wounds in the earth, but within the hospital, a quieter, equally crucial battle is fought, one that demands skill, patience, and an extraordinary degree of resilience. In these early hours, the most severe cases arrive first. A young soldier, barely more than a boy, clings to consciousness, eyes wide and fearful, a leg twisted and shattered by shrapnel. Another, coughing violently from exposure to gas, struggles to breathe as the doctor assesses the situation, weighing immediate interventions against the limits of available supplies. Each case is unique, a puzzle of anatomy, physiology, and circumstance, demanding rapid decisions that balance hope against harsh reality. There is no time to hesitate. Every second carries weight. Every movement can influence survival. Meals are brief, functional, yet sometimes they provide small moments of comfort. Soldiers share stale bread and thin soup, occasionally supplemented by rare parcels from home, tins of fruit, chocolate, or coffee, that transform the ward for fleeting moments. These indulgences are savored not merely for taste, but for the sense of connection to a world that seems otherwise lost. Even a small smile or a whispered joke among men can ripple through the ward, offering a fragile respite from the relentless tension of war. The hospital is alive with constant, overlapping sounds. The soft moans of the wounded, the clinking of metal instruments, the occasional shout when a stretcher is dropped or an urgent need arises. Nurses move quickly, silently, attending to tasks that might seem trivial yet are critical. Changing bandages, adjusting splints, cleaning instruments, reassuring frightened patients with words and gestures that speak louder than any treatment. The doctor works alongside them, a rhythm developing that balances efficiency with the humanity required to preserve morale. Amidst this chaos, the mental and emotional demands are profound. Decisions made in haste can determine life or death. Choices about triage, allocation of scarce resources, or the timing of surgery weigh heavily on the conscience. Yet these decisions must be made continuously, and in the process, the doctor develops a keen awareness of subtle cues, twitches, color changes, the faintest sounds of pain that guide action with precision. Observation becomes as vital as knowledge, intuition as critical as technique. Despite the intensity, small moments of levity appear unexpectedly. A soldier, recovering from a minor injury, might attempt a clumsy gesture of humor, drawing quiet laughter from those nearby. Nurses sometimes engage in brief, playful competitions, juggling instruments or sharing amusing anecdotes, and the fleeting relief these moments bring strengthens bonds among staff and patients alike. In a world dominated by suffering, laughter, however fragile, becomes a form of sustenance. Sleep is a scarce commodity. When the night comes, the tents grow cold, shadows stretch long, and the hum of the hospital continues as the doctor moves from cot to cot, checking vital signs, adjusting bandages, and monitoring those at greatest risk. Dreams are often haunted by memories of faces lost, screams that cannot be silenced, and moments of helplessness that replay endlessly. Rest is brief, yet even these stolen hours provide a semblance of renewal necessary to face the next wave of patients. Even the weather plays a crucial role in the daily rhythm. Rain turns paths to treacherous mud, slowing transport and soaking clothing, while snow freezes muscles and complicates every movement. The doctor adapts, improvising warmth with blankets, fires, and shared body heat when necessary. Survival is not merely about medical skill, but also about ingenuity, awareness, and the ability to respond swiftly to an environment that seems determined to impede every effort. Through all this, the doctor becomes a silent historian of the human condition. Every conversation, every whispered story, every fleeting smile is observed and remembered. Soldiers recount childhood memories, describe homes and rivers, speak of loved ones, and share small hopes that seem almost impossible to sustain amid the devastation. These narratives, often ignored in official records, become a vital part of the work, reminders that even here, in the heart of war, life persists, memories endure, and human resilience cannot be extinguished. Occasionally, rare victories provide moments of profound satisfaction. A patient who could barely move rises, supported by careful physical therapy and persistent encouragement. Another, delirious with fever, begins to respond coherently, offering a whispered word of thanks. These achievements, though often quiet and unremarkable to outsiders, are monumental within the ward, proof that determination, skill, and care can overcome the harshest circumstances. Evenings are a mixture of fatigue and preparation. The doctor checks instruments, organizes supplies, and reviews notes, knowing that the night may bring emergencies as urgent as those faced during the day. Artillery continues its distant rumble, a constant reminder of the war outside. Yet within the hospital, a fragile community persists. Shared labor, small kindnesses, and the commitment to preserve life create a space where humanity, however tenuous, continues to flourish. In all these moments, the doctor learns that healing extends beyond the body. A kind word, a gentle touch, a moment of patience. These gestures, combined with skill, often determine the emotional survival of those under care. Courage is displayed not only in the trenches but within these tents, in quiet perseverance, in attention to the smallest details, and in the dedication to preserving dignity amid chaos. Each day reinforces the profound, sometimes unseen responsibility of the medical staff to protect life, sustain hope, and nurture the fragile threads of humanity that persist even in the darkest times. Dawn arrives again, gray and unsteady, filtering through the patched canvas of the tents and bringing with it the endless cadence of the front. The doctor moves with automatic precision, already aware that every second counts, that the wounded will come in waves, some barely conscious, others screaming in pain, and that every moment offers both opportunity and peril. The mud clings to boots, the cold seeps through thin clothing, and yet there is no pause. Each arrival is a test of skill, judgment, and emotional resilience, and the doctor knows that even a brief lapse can tip the balance between survival and tragedy. Some days begin quietly, almost deceptively so, with only a few injured arriving at first light. But the lull is fragile. Soon, the stretcher bearers appear, faces drawn with fatigue, carrying men whose injuries range from shattered limbs to burns that blister skin, gas exposure that steals breath, or deep shrapnel wounds that defy simple intervention. Each case demands careful assessment, rapid decision-making, and, often, improvisation. Instruments are sterilized hastily, bandages torn from old cloth, and morphine distributed with meticulous care, all while the body protests, muscles stiff from exhaustion and hours of labor. Despite the intensity, moments of levity sometimes emerge, almost incongruously. A soldier recovering from a minor wound might attempt a joke, a playful gesture, or a clumsy imitation of a superior officer, drawing laughter from those around him. Even in such dire conditions, humor persists, delicate and ephemeral, yet capable of lifting spirits just enough to sustain endurance. Nurses occasionally engage in quiet competitions, juggling instruments or teasing one another, their smiles small but powerful acts of defiance against the omnipresent despair. These fleeting moments of humanity ripple through the ward, strengthening morale in ways that medical skill alone cannot. Meals remain sparse and functional. Thin soups, often enriched with whatever scraps of meat or vegetables are available, provide sustenance, while stale bread or hard biscuits are shared among men and staff. Occasionally, care packages from home arrive, bringing tinned fruit, chocolate, or coffee, transforming the ward for brief moments into a place of rare celebration. Soldiers exchange small portions, teasing one another, laughing softly despite their pain, and the doctor allows a moment to share in the brief reprieve, savoring the human connection it fosters amid relentless suffering. Emotional demands are unyielding. Decisions about triage weigh heavily on the mind. Choosing which patient receives immediate attention and which must wait can mean life or death. Observing subtle signs, a flicker of color in pale skin, a faint twitch of a hand, the rhythm of breathing guides these critical choices. Intuition, observation, and knowledge merge into a singular, practiced awareness, yet every outcome carries consequence. Failures leave deep impressions, victories provide quiet satisfaction, and each case reinforces the immense responsibility of those who serve in these tents of temporary refuge. Small triumphs illuminate the darkness. A soldier once unable to sit upright now manages to hold himself with support, encouraged by patient care and gentle guidance. Another, delirious from fever or pain, responds coherently for the first time in days, whispering words of gratitude or naming loved ones. These moments, often invisible to those outside the hospital, are monumental internally, serving as proof that even amidst chaos, life can persist, courage can endure, and hope, however fragile, remains. The environment is a relentless adversary. Rain turns the surrounding terrain into quagmire, slowing transport and soaking clothing, while snow freezes muscles and complicates movement. The doctor and staff adapt, layering blankets, tending fires, improvising with ingenuity. Survival is contingent not only upon medical skill but also on the capacity to improvise, to anticipate obstacles, and to act swiftly in an environment that offers no certainty. Every day reinforces the delicate balance between order and chaos, preparation and improvisation, effort and endurance. Sleep is rare, brief, and often haunted. Even in stolen hours, the mind replays faces of those lost, cries of the desperate, and the persistent hum of artillery beyond the tents. Yet even this limited rest is crucial, for the work never ceases, and the doctor must remain alert, hands steady and mind sharp. Night shifts bring emergencies that test resolve, requiring vigilance, compassion, and courage, all while fatigue threatens to cloud judgment and precision. Through these challenges, the doctor becomes an observer of resilience, recording silently in memory the fragments of human experience that persist amid devastation. Soldiers recount childhood memories, whisper stories of family, dreams, and fleeting hopes, and the doctor listens, aware that these narratives, though unremarkable to outsiders, are lifelines that preserve identity and spirit in a world that seeks to erase both. The act of listening itself becomes part of the work, as critical to survival as any surgical intervention or medical treatment. The complexity of the role becomes clear. It is not merely about healing wounds or administering medicine, but about preserving humanity. A gentle touch, a word of reassurance, an extra blanket or whispered encouragement. These actions, combined with clinical skill, can determine emotional survival. Courage is demonstrated not only on the battlefield but within these tents, through quiet perseverance, meticulous care, and the steadfast attention to every detail, however small, that sustains life. Evenings are a blend of preparation and reflection. Instruments are cleaned, notes reviewed, and supplies checked, knowing that the night may bring urgent arrivals as critical as any during the day. Artillery continues its distant cadence, a constant reminder of the front beyond, while within the hospital, human resilience maintains a fragile equilibrium. Shared labor, small acts of kindness, and the commitment to preserve life create a tenuous community where humanity continues to assert itself, even in the shadow of overwhelming destruction. In the relentless rhythm of war, the doctor realizes that every act, no matter how minor, carries significance. Healing extends beyond the physical. It encompasses emotional sustenance, compassion, and the reinforcement of morale. Each decision, each touch, each word becomes a thread in a fragile web that sustains life and dignity, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, courage, hope, and humanity can endure. Dawn breaks again, pale and hesitant, seeping through the rips in the tent canvas. Yet already the hospital is alive with motion. Stretcher bearers trudge through mud, carrying men whose bodies have been torn by shellfire, bullets, and gas, while the doctor moves from one patient to the next with automatic precision, aware that hesitation could mean death. The wards are filled with low moans, the clatter of metal instruments, and whispered reassurances, all mingling with the distant thunder of artillery, a reminder that the front continues its relentless rhythm, indifferent to the lives within these tents. Some arrivals are immediate emergencies, requiring split-second decisions. A man with a leg shattered by shrapnel screams as the doctor carefully examines the wound, eyes scanning for the extent of internal damage. Another, coughing violently from gas exposure, struggles for every breath, skin pale, lips tinged blue, and yet there is no time for prolonged analysis. Hands move with practiced precision, instruments sterilized in haste, bandages applied, morphine administered sparingly to balance relief and survival. Every second matters, every action carries consequence, and yet the flow of wounded continues, unending and unpredictable. Meals remain utilitarian, sustenance rather than pleasure. Thin soups, occasionally thickened with whatever scraps of meat or vegetables are available, provide nutrition while stale bread or biscuits supplement the diet. When rare parcels arrive from home, Tins of chocolate, coffee, or preserved fruit. Men and staff share them in quiet celebration, laughter soft but genuine, teasing each other over the smallest morsels. These moments of human connection, though fleeting, are vital reminders that even amid relentless suffering, life retains small joys. The mental and emotional burden is constant. Triage decisions, allocation of scarce resources, and the inevitability of failure weigh heavily on the doctor's conscience. Observing subtle signs, the faint twitch of a hand, a slight change in breathing, the return of color to pale skin, guides choices, often determining survival. Each case reinforces the delicate balance between skill, intuition, and the unpredictable nature of human fragility. Every success is hard-won, every failure a quiet trauma that lingers in memory. Despite the intensity, levity appears in unexpected forms. A soldier recovering from minor wounds might attempt humor, mimic a superior officer, or engage in playful banter, drawing chuckles from those nearby. Nurses participate in small games or share humorous stories, their smiles brief yet powerful, lifting spirits just enough to endure the next wave of suffering. Laughter becomes a form of resilience, fragile yet persistent, threading through the ward like an invisible lifeline. The environment itself imposes additional challenges. Rain turns paths into treacherous mud, snow freezes muscles, and cold seeps into bones, complicating transport and treatment. The doctor adapts, improvising warmth with blankets, fires, and body heat when necessary, recognizing that survival depends not only on medical skill but also on ingenuity and flexibility. Every day reinforces the constant negotiation between human effort and the relentless pressure of external conditions. Quiet victories are celebrated internally. A patient who could barely move manages to sit upright with support. A delirious soldier responds coherently to questions. A wound that seemed hopeless begins to heal. These moments, often unseen beyond the tent walls, carry immense weight. They are proof that perseverance, skill, and care can overcome even the harshest circumstances, that hope, fragile yet tangible, can persist. The doctor becomes both healer and chronicler, observing the resilience of the human spirit in its myriad forms. Soldiers recount fragments of home, childhood memories, fleeting dreams, and stories of loved ones, while the staff ensures that every detail, however small, is attended to. Listening, soothing, and encouraging becomes as critical as any surgical intervention, a vital aspect of sustaining life in its emotional and psychological dimensions. Sleep is limited and haunted. When rest is taken, it is brief, fragmented, and filled with dreams of those lost, cries of the suffering, and the constant hum of distant artillery. Yet even these stolen moments are essential, providing a temporary reprieve for hands and mind that must remain ready for the next emergency. Night shifts continue with vigilance, as emergencies rarely pause, and the doctor moves quietly through the tents, adjusting bandages, monitoring vitals, and preparing for unpredictable arrivals. Small gestures define the work as much as medical procedures. A gentle hand on a fevered brow, a whispered word of encouragement, an extra blanket arranged with care. All these actions preserve dignity and morale, reinforcing the invisible yet critical bonds among patients and staff. Courage is not only on the battlefield but also in these quiet acts of attention, in the meticulous care, and in the refusal to let despair dominate the ward. Evening brings preparation rather than closure. Instruments are cleaned, supplies checked, notes reviewed, and every precaution taken to meet the uncertain demands of the night. The distant artillery continues, a reminder that the chaos of the front remains unrelenting. Yet within the hospital, life persists. Shared labor, small kindnesses, and dedication form a fragile community, a buffer against the constant threat of loss and despair, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, humanity endures. Through it all, the doctor understands that the role extends beyond physical healing. Emotional support, compassion, and attention to morale are equally essential, threading through every act of care. Each touch, word, and decision carries meaning, shaping survival and preserving dignity, reinforcing the idea that hope, courage, and humanity are as vital as medicine itself. In this relentless rhythm of war, the quiet perseverance of the medical staff remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.